Hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. Today is a great day. I am so honored to hang out with somebody that is just got an amazing mind, an amazing design flair, and we're going to unpack that today. Wade Weissman from Wade Weissman Architecture. How are you today?
I'm great, Dave. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. I'm so excited. I've been following your stuff for years and probably I'm a secret stalker. You probably don't even know that, but I just enjoy your designs. I just was on your LinkedIn profile and found a picture and I'm like, oh my gosh, that picture of an exterior with a bunch of wood and stone. And it was just fantastic. So thank you for spending some time with us. I want to kind of learn more about some of the things on your side. So, how did you first come and you get involved with the residential design aspect of your business?
So that it's interesting. Uh, I always kind of had an interest in, residential design.
Okay.
And I used to, live on the east side of Milwaukee, going to architecture school, and there's all these amazing homes everywhere, old historic homes. And I remember, walking in the middle of winter, to a house party or something, and all the lights were on inside, and you'd look inside and you'd see these extraordinary rooms and paneling and these, beautiful plaster ceilings and just this level of craftsmanship. And I was kind of in awe of that. When I was in my first, architecture job, was working for a firm, and they were doing a historic renovation of an old house on Pine Lake.
Okay.
And by default, I ended up needing to go there every week and meet with the contractor and the subcontractors just to understand how things were moving along. And so we were working for this client. She had this great old house, but it had fallen into very big disrepair. And during that summer, as I was going through meeting with the contractor on site, just fell in love with it, kind of. I never thought that that's my pursuit
Sure.
in architecture, because I was very interested in big context and big projects and big vision casting. But when I got a chance to really get my hands on this sort of, the tranquility of the job sites, as opposed to, the great big, construction projects, there was something very beautiful and timeless about it. And it kind of captured my imagination. And I mean, literally, working, building a practice that sort of works within that sort of custom residential genre or niche, gives me an opportunity to work on extraordinary properties, really interesting, old, significant historic homes, wonderful craftspeople, and signature properties. And I thought, wow, what a, pulling up to someone's dream house property every day, no matter what time of year it is, has always been kind of a thrill for me, because you feel privileged.
Wow. So were you, when you were, I'm assuming it's UWM School of Architecture, correct?
Yep.
When you were going down that path, originally when you jumped in, were you thinking more commercial, or were you just liking architecture in general and then you kind of stumbled on the residential? Is that how you would depict that?
I would, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think, in my mind, there was always a separation between the two, because residential architecture was never really taught as a course.
Okay.
There was no coursework that specifically went into that realm. And so it's kind of been, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's kind of been this little sort of like subculture in the architecture sort of arena of residential architects. And AIA, can have, certain promotional sort of awards and recognitions and things, but the AIA's focus really is on the large sort of practice that handles, government, government buildings and institutional buildings and large urban buildings. And so sorry about that. We ended up having an opportunity to really not, you don't really get exposed to residential architecture in the in the classroom.
Sure,
But when
sure.
you work for firms, firms of all different sizes, they will have commissions that will come up that will allow, that might be a residence here and there. And
Yeah,
that's really what had happened, to me, is I was
sure.
working for a firm that was mostly commercial. They did, hospitals and
Yeah,
libraries and, educational buildings, et cetera. And so, when we got this commission for this historic house, it really was kind of an odd project in the office. But for me, as a
yeah,
student,
sure.
level, I was very interested in it. I really kind of fell in love with the whole idea of it. But I never thought it was going to be a career path, really. It wasn't
Sure.
until in interior design, I had a cousin that was an interior designer in Milwaukee.
Okay.
And he went off on his own and he was working on these amazing, projects. And so I would come back on a break and he would say, "Hey, do you want to come see this house I'm working on?" And so I would go with him and I would
Yeah.
see what was happening and, what the drawing process was. And then one day he said, there really isn't any firm in Milwaukee that specializes in residential design. He's
Yeah.
like, I think, Milwaukee needs that really badly. And, when I got out of graduate school, I toyed with that and thought, could this really be a career choice?
Sure.
And as soon as I started designing one house, I started getting referrals for the next one and the next one and the next one. And it literally just grew from that.
Sure. Wow. Well, and I want to circle back to something you said because there's usually, there's a lot of people that listen that are kind of, they might have a passion, but they're not pursuing that passion. They're in their day job and they're just in the back of their mind, there's something gnawing at them, and I like
Yeah.
what you said about, I think about so many people just wake up and do their job. And I wrote down, lift your head up because like you're walking to school and something kind of hit you. It wasn't like you went looking for it. It kind of found you. And I
Right.
like that about, entrepreneurs because hopefully we have our head up. We're always looking, for opportunities rather than just looking down at what exactly we have to do right then and there. That might have, if you wouldn't have looked up, you might have missed that whole, spot and this whole, empire that you're working on building, which is so awesome. That might never have been because you were too busy looking down. So I'm glad, that you were looking up and, at least that hit you in some way, shape, or form. And back then, I mean, I don't know when this was, but like when I was involved in the residential construction industry in the, started in the late 80s, there wasn't, like you said, there wasn't a firm that was focusing purely on residential. These large commercial architecture firms, it was like an, oh, by the way, hey, would you draw this house for me? And it was like, oh, all right, and it was just kind of more of a pain to help a client or, if somebody's building a big building and they wanted their house built, it was like, all right, I guess, but
Yeah.
you really kind of carved out that niche and again, have done a fantastic job at it. So, I appreciate that. How did you transition from, because this is what most people struggle with. This is where a lot of people, they kind of stop. You have this vision, you know what you love to do. How did you convert that into, rather than just go work for another firm, how did you decide to start Wade Weissman Architecture? Do you remember that transition?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So it really just came out of um, being young and somewhat foolhardy, not really thinking about like, how difficult it would be. It really sort of came organically. It was, somebody that I cared about, that I loved, who said, I'm struggling with, where to put this addition or how to fix this house or whatever. And then saying, well, God, what do you think, Wade? And I would, say, oh, well, what about this? What about that?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they'd say, oh, that I love that. Can you draw me a sketch of what you're thinking about? And I have always had this ability to sketch. And
Wow.
so, all of a sudden I would just, sort of sketch some solutions and, none of this was transactional. There was
Sure.
no, there was no proposal. There was no me wondering, It was
Yeah.
just kind of like, well, what do you think this is what would look like, or what would be successful here? I'm thinking about this. And all of a sudden, a sketch leads to, a discussion, and the discussion leads to, an excitement. And then the
Yeah.
excitement is motivation to try to create a transaction out of
Wow.
it. And so I never really thought of it in terms of, like, I'm going to form a business model.
Okay.
The business model kind of came out of the dialogue and the opportunities that were just coming up from, hey, would you just take a look at this for me, a
Sure.
favor, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
um, and those favors now we still do all the time. We do
Yeah.
them a little bit more intentionally. So, I'll look at properties with
Yeah.
people, and either they might be looking at 4 or 5 properties, and maybe we'll help them, establish a piece of property, or review it for maybe what their dreams might be down the road. I'll do that for anybody. I always tell people, we don't need to get paid for this right now.
Sure.
If you like the ideas and you feel like I'm the best person for it, then let's come up with an
Wow.
equitable transaction.
Tell me
Um,
that doesn't fly in the face of most business today, right?
yeah, it
Do
goes
some
back.
for free first, and then if you like it, buy it. I mean, they don't allow me to do that at Pick and Save. When I go in there and say, hey, can I take the food home, and if I like it, I'll come back next time and pay for it. But it's
No,
brilliant because you build that trust with those people. That's awesome.
and you don't want. I mean, I don't think a good relationship is ever built on I want your business.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a good business relationship is, you'd be fun to work with.
Yeah.
This would be a really fun project to work with. And then the transaction, it comes in a mutual respect. Look, this person is going to put their best effort into it. I want to make sure that they're compensated, adequately.
Yeah.
And then you have a really good basis. But like, it seems like when somebody's just shopping you out, it's very difficult because what you need,
Yeah.
right? I know what I need for my business to survive. I know
Right.
what I have for payroll and benefits and overhead and everything else.
Yeah.
Like, I know that part of it, and so I know how to establish the increment and the dollar amount for the service. What I never like is if someone is just trying to sell me on something, and I don't have the ability or the insight to know if it's a good match.
Sure.
If I have an understand, like, we get plenty of work over the internet these days.
Wow.
But I always tell people the same thing: please interview more people, because I want to make sure that this is a very personal and it's a fairly long term relationship. If I'm designing you a residence, we're likely going to be talking and connected for the next 3 years or more.
Yeah.
And so, you got to like the person, you got to respect, but you got to trust.
Right.
And it's a two-way street. I mean, you got to interview your client a little bit too.
Sure. Yeah.
But for me, those are more important than, I can come in with a commodities price and beat out my competition.
Right.
That doesn't really, there's so much more to designing a custom residence than that.
Sure.
It's not one service fits all.
So you brought up a great point again, which is interesting because you transitioned into talking about payroll and benefits. So you're starting at you're aware, and so people are coming to you and saying, hey, I think you should do this. How long before you got the business sense, so to speak? I mean, I excuse me, I remember I had lunch with one of the adjunct professors at UWM in the School of Architecture, and he said, I went into school, it was 6 years, and he said, I remember 2 business courses out of 6 years. And when you think, because he's like, I would love to start my own firm, I have no clue how. And whether it's in architecture or whatever industry that the listeners are in today, I think that that's in the back of people's mind, and some people are built for it and some aren't. And so for the people that are built for it, how did you transition from that, I think I could do it, to, what, I'm going to do it. And then did you learn the business side, or was it trial by fire, or how did that transition happen for you?
Well, for me personally, there was a couple of key events. So, I started this business really, as a single proprietor,
Okay.
helping people with, I used to call it the porch of the month, and so I would help somebody with their front porch or with, a failing part of the building, a garage addition, something like that. Very, small scale, very handleable by one person. You do the details, you learn, if it's got a review process, you go through that.
Sure.
And you're essentially sizing your business for what your needs are at the moment, right? It wasn't until, all of a sudden I, started getting, more work, and each time you get a little bit maybe sophisticated. So, well, wow, now I'm going from additions and porches to a small scale home.
Okay.
Or a garage building or a freestanding building, and then it goes to a larger home, and all of a sudden it gets to a bigger home or an estate that has outbuildings, and now there's relationships between buildings and site plans and stuff.
Sure.
So what happens is as your reputation begins to grow and you get to have a bigger portfolio, a more sophisticated portfolio, then incrementally people start giving you bigger opportunities. And it's when those opportunities come is when you're forced to have to make decisions on infrastructure and insurance carriage and some of the carriers and all the other things that go into creating a business that's suitable for the sophistication of the client and the project.
Yeah.
And so these things for me were more organic, and they just kind of came about as being evolutionary. But by then you're starting to have some internal infrastructure. I've got some employees now. I got an accountant, a bookkeeper. I have other people now to start doing some reconnaissance for me. Like, can you talk to a couple insurance carriers and let's see what E&O insurance is going to look like? Can you, and how could we add on to it? So sometimes you have a client that you get a bigger commission, and they come back and they say, I'm sorry, I need you to carry $2 million, on your policy. And you're like, wow, okay, big bump. But, time that happens, then you also have to go to your banker and say, I think I need a bigger line of credit. I need to hire somebody. I got to acquire some equipment. I need some infrastructure. My IT is more expensive. I got software to purchase, whatever those things are. They're very incremental with the opportunities that are coming into the business. So you never really, what's interesting is people can look and they look way down the road and think, oh my God, that's so daunting.
Yeah.
But if they really only looked at the realm that they need at the moment based on the commission that's in their trust, they'd be able to start, incrementally growing, and then you have more resources internally to utilize.
Sure. Wow. Well, and I think of Field of Dreams, the movie where, if you build it, they will come. That's really kind of and there's no right or wrong. I've run into both sides on the business perspective, but to your point, Wade, if you build it first and you build this big thing, and that's daunting because it's like, oh my gosh, now I have to fill the stands, or now I have to fill the number of man hours. I mean, you guys probably focus a lot on man hours and things like that. Whatever the listener is actually focusing on, it would be hard to have that mentality, rent a building, build a team, and get it all designed, get everything ready, and now let's go find some customers. That's kind of hard. That's hard. You kind of did it the opposite way, which I think is more successful for most people. So I'm just curious on your end, do you think you built it as you were going? Does that feel more like what you would define that as for yourself? Uh-oh, lost you. We lost coverage.
So you had asked me a question about about the sort of organic nature of how we were building things.
Yeah. Because my question, I guess, because you're good at, I watched you with what do you call that brown paper that's in a roll that you draw on? What's that called?
Yellow trace, yeah.
Okay, I've seen that blank turn into like, oh my gosh, I just can't believe how this, and we'll unpack that in a little bit, but that seemed to be your strength. So again, a lot of people listening are really good at what they do, whatever that is, but you have to then somehow transition into all this payroll benefits things. I'm just trying to understand if that came naturally for you, if you like that piece, or if you're super quick to delegate and, get back to the trace part, the design part of your world. Just for listeners that are struggling with that exact piece, I'm just looking for any wisdom that you have for them.
Sure. Well, I think one of the most important things is that to understand where your business model fits.
Okay.
Within the sort of industry that you're sort of serving. So, I'm serving the home building industry.
Okay.
So, what I see my role professionally is to, interpret what builders, engineers, municipalities need from our services, understand what it is that their objectives are, and their motivation is for doing this project, undertaking a project, and then being able to guide and bridge the two of those things. And so, what we really are is we're not just visionaries, we're not just sketch artists.
Mm-hmm.
We are essentially utilizing a different form of communication that allows us to be able to bridge a client's desire for, a residence, and all of the parties that need to understand what it is that we're essentially focusing on, what's our common goal. And that is really kind of like, to me, the true essence of what it is that our real value is in the marketplace. Okay. Our real value in the marketplace is not just a drafting service.
Sure.
There are lots of other people. Our value is being able to, understand the need, package it into something that's beautiful,
Yep.
That's buildable, and then be able to provide a roadmap and assurances that this vision can be carried out and have the durability that it's necessary for its setting, right?
Yeah.
And then you can layer on all the other stuff onto it: craftsmanship, vision, historic references, what any of those kinds of things. That's all layers on it. And so I think that when we, breaking what it is that we do down into understanding our industry, the people that essentially are relying on those services, and where the source of that vision comes from, which is the client, right? That the source of money and the source of vision is actually coming from the client's wish to do this. Those are essentially that's just it. And so if we're that conduit, then what is it how do we utilize our skills in that conduit, to make it even better, to strengthen our position and to assure, sort of longevity of a business model.
Sure. So, and I mean, oh my gosh, this is awesome. So I'm thinking about you sitting with somebody and you are taking a blank piece of paper and you're kind of inserting, you got to get information out of their brain,
Mm-hmm.
your brain, and then from your brain onto that piece of paper. So how
Yes.
do everything about architecture because you've been doing it forever. But for me, that doesn't know it, or a client that hasn't gone through this experience before, they find you, they fall in love with what you're doing, they jump onto your vision and they're like, hey, Wade, can you help me draw this house or draw this house for me, right? I mean,
Yep.
You know probably better what it looks like from the beginning than they do. How do you draw that out? Because that's an art in itself, is trying to really, like you said, the source of the vision is the client. How do you draw that out from them? I really am curious how you do that.
Well, what's great is technology has given us lots of ways to do that now better. It used to be people would come in with this, manila folder full of ripped out magazine images.
Okay.
They see things that spawn something in their mind, and then they're very compelled to sit down and look at each picture and say, I don't know why I picked that. I think it was because of the railing. I like that railing.
Okay.
I don't remember. Oh yeah, this one. I really like this trim in that window seat. I love that.
Sure.
I gotta have that. And so but now they can do it on, Pinterest or House or some of these other
Sure.
sort of, like electronic vehicles. And so, they'll come to you with those kinds of things. These are inspiring to me. And then it's our job to somewhat sift through it, understand some of the parameters of it. We do a pretty extensive questionnaire
Okay.
for our clients to answer.
Okay.
We talk about target goals. We talk about how they like to live inside, outside. Are there special needs? Are they looking, what's the duration that they want this house to be in, under their guidance or responsibility, or if it's going to become multi-generational.
Sure.
And then what that does for us is it helps us to sort of almost flow chart into different criteria questions that we would want to ask. So great, this is a multi-generational home, are you then looking for, more durable materials? Are we considering, slate and copper and stone or masonry? Are we thinking about long-term heritage windows?
Sure.
What are we really looking at? Because now I can help establish to you what I think a cost per square foot's going to be.
Okay.
And we can start having a discussion about, where your comfort level is in this investment,
Sure.
and so those become instruments of being able to, graphically represent some of these things, in, maybe diagramming possible framework for solutions. So like, for instance, if a client gives me a program and it says, I want 5 bedrooms en suite, I'd love to have a little gathering place for, study materials and for the kids to have a playroom, and I need a study, and I need a workout room and a gym, and we can start to break down these things, and we can start to stack them vertically, and we can start to essentially assemble them on a diagrammatic site plan, so that we know, from the orientation of the sun and towards a view, or, serenity on a site or a hilltop or something. We have the tools then to be able to start looking at how we want different spaces in this residence to relate to its landscape. And so you start to take care of the bigger issues. And then from there, you really start to sort of apply what I would consider would be the massing, and then, the ability to start working out, the floor plans on the upper level where the roof is affected, because the roof and the form of the house really sets the pace for the design, the vision, those kinds of things. And so, you're kind of jumping around a little bit, because you need to kind of take a look at multiple things at one time. And as you're doing that, then other questions about the floor plan might get answered. Other questions about the site plan might get answered. Other questions about site circulation might get answered.
Sure.
And so when you start to sort of jump around these things, all of a sudden this image begins to emerge. And therein lies what you consider being the sort of better solution for this problem. And even its vague state, to start to have a dialogue of how this is beginning to form with your client gets them really involved in the process, because it's not technical drawings yet.
Yeah.
It's still very much a wet piece of clay. And so they're never looking at it like, oh, it's too precious to change. That can alienate a client just as much as showing something that they don't like.
Sure.
Right. So to me, I don't care if they don't like it. I want you to tell me you don't like it, like, you're not hurting my feelings. At the end of the day, we all leave. They're there, right?
Yeah.
That's home.
Yeah.
So, I think, for me, it's, you don't take anything personally, but you want to make sure that their input is the real truth. And you want to make sure that they feel comfortable being able to share those truths.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So, and it's so unique, because I think back to the days when I was working with architects, and they would come in and they would be designing and working with clients. And, what you just said was so awesome, because there were people in that I was involved with in their process that the architect was deciding what's going on and what's going to work and what's not. And they're, like you said, at the end of the day, you're going home to your house. These people have to live with it. Why, why are you telling these people that, no, you don't want that? It's like, oh my gosh. I mean, if they really do, and it's not like, detrimental to the project, why would they not get to choose that piece? So I got to believe that you're building trust early on with them, because there's got to be that trust for your clients. They put that trust in you to be able to make those decisions for them, because most of people you're working with probably can't make the decision purely on their own. They do need your guidance. Is that true? Or do you find a lot of people are, making a lot of those decisions themselves?
It's one of those things that I try to like work through in the interviewing process.
Okay.
Is you start to look for some key things that say this is a client that I think I can work with, and one of them is I'm not coming in with any preconceived notions. I can tell you what I like and what I don't like, but I'm coming to you because of your expertise.
Sure.
And if there's a mutual respect in that sort of dialogue right from the get-go, then you feel like this is not going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah.
There are individuals that I've worked with before that come in and they have a very definite idea of what they want. Yeah. But they also seem to have a debris pile of people that they had started going down
Sure.
the path with,
yeah.
but ended up not working out, and those are sometimes red flags for me.
Right.
Because the common thread in all of those in those relationships between that client and all of those people in the debris pile is the client.
Yeah. I have such a great visual with debris pile, so I think that's awesome. I mean, that just is fantastic. But because let me just I've always been curious, because, and maybe you correct me if I'm wrong, the vast majority of projects that I've worked with you guys on have a style, and so when somebody wants to come in with a different style, and I'm going to just use, opposite ends of the spectrum. Let's say you're focused more on a traditional, and somebody comes in and they want an ultra modern, type of home. What do you do in that situation? Are you all things to all people, or do you just kind of have a group of, or your design, and that's how you're going to kind of focus? How do you work through something like that?
Well, if the client is, usually they're going to make a decision on, and I wouldn't say that every client is this, but a lot of clients, they're going to look to see, if your body of work is embracing the things that they're looking for. So I don't know if I'd really get a phone call from somebody saying, hey, I really love Calatrava design, but I think, you're the best I'm going to get to. So, can you do something like that? And I probably would say to them, maybe it's best if I lead you to who I think might be a better, architect.
Gotcha.
I don't know if you remember that in Miracle on 34th Street. But do you remember when that that woman goes to the employee and says, or the store manager, and says, your Santa just sent me to Gimbals. Can you imagine Macy's sending me to Gimbals? It's been so long since that the customer's been number one. I just don't know how to take it.
Right.
And so there was this shock, right? He was like, okay, we got to fire the Santa.
Yeah.
But then, but then the owner came in and got a letter from this happy client saying, oh my God, I'm going to give you all my business because you didn't just value a sale, you valued your customer.
Right. Right.
That's a really great lesson, right? I mean,
absolutely.
There's unfortunately a lot of people don't do that. Like, how is this client going to be best served? If they're looking for a Calatrava response, and I'm giving them romantic Midwestern, vernacular, I would rather go to like a John Vetter or somebody like that and say, hey, I think I've got a client that's probably more geared to you.
Right.
Because I want them to get the right service, but I also want them to feel the thrill of that match. Yeah. Because I know that a lot of my clients get that thrill from the match that you have. And you want everybody to have that. I mean, God, if you're going to spend a lot of money on a house, you should have that experience. Right. It should be amazing. Yeah. It actually bewilders me that so many people think it's miserable.
Yeah.
as a profit,
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, and that's the sad part. I mean, for 17 years, I was on the, the local arbitration board for the Builders Association. And, it was sad to see how many people were disgruntled and they no longer were number one in the equation.
Yeah.
Great book is People Over Profit, because if you treat people right, whether it's your interior team, your interior customer or your exterior customer, if you treat people right, profit just happens. I mean, it just does. It's proven. But we so often, reverse that, and profits first, and then people can, be anywhere after first, really doesn't matter. So I love that piece that you're able to, to separate that. John Vetter would also appreciate that too, because, that's a great potential situation where it's like, John, they do a great job at, that ultra modern type home. And, I guess I never thought of that, but that they would look at your work and not really see that. But I got to believe that you have a following. It'd be like saying to Frank Lloyd Wright, hey, can you build me, a 10-12 roof pitch, make me an old fashioned home. That's where I think people they want a Wade Weissmann house. And so that's why I was curious if you get a lot of those people, that are focused there. It's awesome that at the end of the day, it's people first, and, the client is dictating this whole thing. That's got to be such a hard transition, because a lot of firms in the 70s and 80s, it was just crank out the drawings, right? Just crank it out, just get it out, be as complete as possible, but do it in as few hours as possible. So that transition, are you, like the rest of your team, is it hard for them to adopt to your tenets of faith, so to speak, or do you hire looking for that as a kind of a prerequisite for people to be, valuing other people so much?
Well, I think like any firm, you build an office culture, right? And then, as people are advancing and becoming sort of senior level in the management of the business and of the individuals and the projects,
Yeah.
You're essentially the message is somewhat sustained, through the sort of senior ranks of the firm, and I think what's being taught is we're also trying to create ultimately a very durable good, right? That has to be made and flashed, and the oversight of it should be well appointed. So it's not only the couture appointments, but it's also going to be the technical requirements, right? That essentially really need to be thoroughly resolved, so that the investment that's made in all the pretty finishes isn't compromised by a leaky roof or
Sure.
a chancy sort of rain shield system. We really want to make sure that it is a durable good and that it's built well. It's not only shows a lot of craftsmanship, but it's also technically solid. And so you start to build rapport with engineers and civil engineers and other people that are going to be necessary in assuring that this is being built properly. We do a lot of work in Southern California. They have waterproofing specialists that are another consultant that come into the project for us. We want to make sure that those areas are covered. We want to be able to give the client the good, better, best options and all of those. As you know, the industry continues to advance all the time.
Sure.
And new products come online all the time. And so you just want to make sure that you're resourceful enough to be able to share that with the client. At the end, you want to make sure that the client can say, is that essential? You say, no, it's not essential. Or yes, it is essential. I think this would be we're being penny wise and dollar foolish here if we don't upgrade this at the time. And I'd like to be a part of those about those decisions, because no matter what component goes into a house or onto a house, we want to make sure that it's resolved in a way that, number one, it's not short-sighted of something else, but we also want to make sure that nothing looks odd. We're essentially trying to make sure that we're their insurance policy, their design insurance policy.
Sure.
But my staff understands that, because in executing all those little details, and the way you communicate how those things are, and the constructability and the durability, I'm hopefully teaching a lot of young designers some timeless ways of detailing a residence that will have longevity, and give the clients years and years of service without a lot of oversight or maintenance.
Sure.
People are always looking for ease. Technology has made our lives so much more complex that we can do so many things. So now somebody doesn't have a house. Like when I was a kid, it's like you had a house, right?
Yep.
Now I know people that have multiple homes all
Sure.
over the place,
Yeah.
and so, they're looking for continuity rather than each one being a separate essay, right? When they come in, they want to hit the remote on the TV. They want it to kind of be the same as in all their other residents.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, my remote has like 100 buttons, and I think I know how to use 3 of them. So,
Right, exactly.
Really frustrating to have, and that's the drawback of that, of technology. And I remember back when, and I don't know where you're at now, most of your drawings that I ever saw felt like they were hand drawn.
They were
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah. And so, and there was just something, I don't know what, there was just something like special about that, that you thought about the labor that was, that had gone into it, and you looked at the lettering, and, I mean, maybe that was just me, being weird about it, but that's gotta be a really important, again, people over profit thing. It would save you potential money to just type it all in, move it around. But I think that there's a connection that a client's got to have with that blueprint and with their house. We're trying to get them to, make a pretty large decision based on a 2-dimensional thing. Have you guys moved into the 3D type stuff? Is that pretty prevalent now for you?
It is, yeah. It is. And there are advantages to both, right?
Sure.
I mean, I think, since I was educated in the days before computer were, sort of mainstays of our industry,
Yeah.
Everything was done by hand, right? And all these great architecture firms and all these great buildings that you see everywhere, in our urban location, we're all done with drawings that were done by hand. I mean, the
Sure.
nation's capital, all the bridges, I mean, all that stuff was all
Yeah.
done by hand.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, although they were designing a thing and it was to a scale, it's still a graphic representation. It's, it may look exact, but it's really just an abstract way of being able to communicate, right? Drawings are.
Yeah.
Now with 3D and modeling and what we call, this sort of like, you're essentially, you're building this, in an electronic space, so you can actually look at everything as an object, right? So you draw it up, but essentially what you're drawing the object in space. And then once it's in that space, you can really look at every little in detail. You can blow it up, you can examine it, you can see where things come together, the joinery. So there's more insight from our perspective. The problem is if you continue to utilize that, because it will prompt you that you can draw this thing down to the nail, right?
Yeah.
And you have to know when you're representing it enough, because
Sure.
otherwise you can burn enormous hours
Yeah.
just in the minutia that
Sure.
this tool will allow you to get into.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that really serves the client well, because I think it's exhaustive for hours, and we charge for our time.
Yep.
And I don't think that it streamlines it. I do think that there are some lessons that, can still be learned from examining old drawings and the abstract representation that we are essentially trying to do. And I know some people that are awesome at being able to draw that.
Sure.
Like they say, here's a piece of trim, but it's just it's just a rectangle.
Yeah.
There's no detail to it. And he's showing where the trim goes relative to other things.
Sure.
That's great. That's a very simplified, abstract representation. Now, if you were to draw that up pictorially, and just because it would allow you to, that can cause an enormous amount of extra time going into things. Sure. And that's one of those things that experience and creating some quickness and some deadlines will allow you to hopefully do the most essential things.
Sure. Wow. And so, but it's interesting because from the personality side, I do a ton of work with the DISC personality assessment. And if you think of 4 different personalities, there is a personality that, like me, I'm direct, I'm results oriented. If I came to you and wanted a house drawn and a project done, and I really, wanted you to do all the awesome stuff you do, in my mind, Wade, I'd be like, hey, just get it done, right? I'd want to see an elevation, and I'd be just like, oh, that's awesome. Let's do it. If you pushed open the CAD or whatever you're using, and you started showing me the truss drawings, the floor joists, you started showing me that, my eyes would, the experience would change dramatically, right? It would just be it would turn into a negative. I fell in love with the front. Let's just leave it at that. Now, there's also the engineer that needs that engineer type personality that definitely needs to know, they want to know the tensile strength of those, 2x4s. They want to know the connections, and they want to understand that. So there are both sides to that. I'm just curious, as we start to come in for a landing on this, how do you kind of, figure that out how do you know when to pull that out, so to speak, and when not to, because that's like key to the success of that relationship. So I'm just curious how you do that.
Well, I think it's knowing who your receiver is and what kind of behavioral style they, sort of favor, so, if you have, someone who's technically oriented, clearly that conversation makes them feel more secure, knowing that you're attending to the things that are important to them. If somebody is more aesthetically driven, feeling driven, you're going to want to, speak to that. You're going to want to be able to say, oh, when your whole family comes over, 8 times a summer, to hang out around your pool, we're going to make it easy for you to be able to, fill coolers with ice. And, they're more in sort of sync with that kind of, so it really is a very important thing to understand who your receiver is, because there's ways that you can, modify your conversation that will build trust in that you can build trust with them when you understand that things are important to them.
That's awesome.
And that's a secret thing. Yeah. It's a really important thing.
Absolutely. So do you uncover that then in your questioning? Is that usually come up in your questions to the client by the end of that questionnaire? You or whoever is going to kind of run with that client, do they have a pretty good sense of their personality and the style that they need to work on?
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of it comes from nonverbal or sort of like, you could see somebody that, prints the thing out and then scribbles stuff down with handwritten, right? And it's kind of hard to decipher, and you're like, what's that word? And you're trying to, and then there are those people that, actually input it into the computer and then, essentially make a perfect, everything is bullet pointed. So you understand a little bit of, this person is very detail oriented. Yeah. This organization is very important to them. We will speak to them about our process.
That's awesome.
Making sure that we tailor those services so that they hear the communication most effectively. And that's going to be in, succinct, very sort of organized, sort of responses. And the person that's going to be all over the place or shoving in little comments here and there and stuff like that, you can tell something about them too. Absolutely. That, they're spontaneous, that their personality may not be as organized, but that's what they're relying us to be for them. I mean, and so, it's really interesting to sort of, you can really get some clues out of just even those kinds of like responses.
That's so cool. Yeah, and there's research out there now, it's crazy, on how words positively or negatively affect a brain. And so, I know for me, like when I hear the word process, you've used that before. There's like
Yeah.
a chemical that's released in my brain. I don't try to do it. I don't have any control over it. It's released in my brain, and it turns out to be like it's a potential negative, because I start thinking about spreadsheets, and I think about, oh my gosh, 15 points, and oh, this is going to be such a labor intensive thing with, with weight. And, that's what that word does to my brain. So what I've learned is, like, the word that I like, and that I insert in its place is path. So
Oh,
the path instead of the process, because like behind in our woods behind our house, we built the path that goes down to a fire pit. And so I immediately am drawn to that. And I think, it's really not that challenging. And so that, to reiterate exactly what you said, that's the importance of understanding the people that we're working with, that we're, trying to, come alongside and help. That's the importance of understanding them, because without that, if people keep using the word spreadsheet and process, my brain, it just fries, and I don't try to
yeah,
do it. I don't have any control over it. It just happens. So,
yeah,
that's what's so interesting is, boy, when people would fall in love with they'd never leave the elevation. Your elevations are so elegant that it's like, boy, they just are just stuck on that page. And, you could tell that, like, if the wife was that way, the spouse is like looking through, and she just lines up there, and all of a sudden he ends up like, where's the floor plan? you know where's the
yeah,
where's the trust drawing? And he was, completely two different people. So I so appreciate that your, firm is dialed deep into understanding that, because there are, unfortunately, a lot of companies around that the message and the delivery of the message never deviates. It's always
yeah,
the same, and that works for a certain quadrant of people, but it doesn't work for, the other people that aren't necessarily in that personality quadrant. So that's so cool. Hey, as we start to land here, continue, I got one question. So we got a bunch of people that would really value like a tip of the week from you. So what's Wade's tip of the week that you, from a business perspective, you can and go wherever you want with this? If you had one thing to share with people, what would that be?
well, I'm gonna orient it towards this sort of immediate environment that we're working in right now.
Sure.
Is we've obviously been faced by a worldwide pandemic,
Hmm.
and some business industries have strengthened and moved forward. I happen to be a part of one of those industries right now, which is really blessed. But one of the things is we got so caught up in how our business is going to respond to our clients and this pandemic sort of arena that we're working in, and being able to set everybody up and work outside the office and things. The one thing that I would say is that my sort of advice of the week is, make sure that you also go back and touch base with all the individuals in your company, as so that they don't feel alienated, because physically now we're apart, we're working apart. We feel like we hit a home run with that,
Yeah.
because we had the software and the planning.
Hmm.
Where we missed out is, we ended up having an individual that we like very much end up giving notice, because they felt as if they weren't getting the individual sort of need. So
Sure.
you learn a lesson the hard
Yep.
way sometimes. But
Yep.
the one thing I would say is, make sure you're looking at making sure that your flock is okay, not just your infrastructure.
Awesome. Great, great, great advice. And I've been telling people for years and trying to help people get to the point where they treat their internal, I call them internal customer. You know what? That's internal customer. A leader needs to treat that person on their team, the same as an external customer. And I
Yeah,
think that we've all had that offense in our life as a consumer. And I won't mention names, but you look at, an ad and it's $49 for something and it says underneath new customers only. And I'm like, my gosh, I've been a customer here for 10 years and you're giving somebody that has zero, customer experience, they're getting a better deal than I'm getting. And I think that's some of the time what we do to our internal team, our internal customer. We take them for granted. We start thinking, oh, they'll be fine. We layer up things that maybe we need to unpack with them. So that's such great advice, Wade, as we close this down. Thank you for sharing that. So what's the best way for people if they want to learn more about, Wade Weissmann Architecture, they want to learn more about you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
So we on our website, obviously we have the ability for anybody to reach out to us and communicate with us if someone's thinking about a project, or even if they're looking for, process, just understanding a process. Wade Weissmann Architecture, or wwa-design.com is our web address. I also published, we had a book published about our architecture. It's a monograph that came out about a year ago. It's called Heirloom Houses. You can buy it on Amazon, or other local bookshops have it as well. If you can't find it, just call our offices and we'll be happy to sign one to you and send it. So there's and our website has a large portfolio on it too. And there are, we talk a little bit about our process. We talk a little bit about the individuals that are working on our team. But there's also, and there also are a lot of, we've been doing more and more sort of Instagram live stuff too. Okay. So you can find copies of some of those interviews, which hopefully describe us a little bit. And there is a videotape interview of me on our website as well, if you want to get a little bit more insight into how we do things.
Wow. So, I totally forgot that you wrote that book. That's a fellow author. So I'm even now, you know what, you raised even more in my mind, Wade. So thank you so much. That's awesome. Well, this has been fantastic. The hour just flew by, and I'm so honored that you took that time to help me. I'm honored that you took time to help our listeners. And again, thank you so much for all the influence and the impact that you've had in the residential, community, not only local, but, nationally, and just keep pushing forward. And again, thank you so much for everything that you've done for our city. I appreciate that.
Well, and you too, Dave. Thank you. It's really good to hear the opinions of the fellow leaders in the community, and really just the humility of being able to talk about their struggles and their challenges, because everybody wants to present this public face that we have all the answers and we're all so successful. Yeah. The truth is we're all searching, and we all have moments where we're unsure and we feel our way through it, and hopefully we seek advice of people like yourself, or people that we meet through you being their spokesperson. Sure. And it's great because it helps all of us.
Yeah, that's awesome. One quick story and I'll let you go. So I was, one of my podcasts, I had a guy from out west that used to live in Milwaukee. He had a great influence on me. And I said, so his name was Eric Plantenberg. I said, Eric, what's one thing that most people don't know about you? And he's a super positive guy. He's into personal development, that he's just one of those kind of guys. And he said, what most people don't know is that I have bad days. Yeah. I mean, we put people up on such a pedestal, and when they have a bad day, I mean, I get this all the time at the club. When it was open, we were playing racquetball a bunch of times a week. And if I had a bad day and I'm sitting there sulking, the guy's like, oh, Mr. Positive Polarity, way to go, And I'm just like, my gosh, I'm a human, So I appreciate so much what you just said, that, our goal is this. There's times that we hit a speed bump and we're just not feeling it, and my gosh, let us recuperate, and we'll be back in a day or so, So
and our needs change over the duration of time, right? Yeah. So, I've been in business 20 years, my ambitions, when I was in my 30s are different than in the middle of my 50s. You know what I mean? Yep. And so, and not only that, but the context of where we are in the timeline of our life also affects some of the decisions we have been kicking down the road,
Right. Yep.
So and it's all part of, just having the humility to look at it and share that humility with other people and say, I have a new challenge,
Yeah.
you
Absolutely.
know?
Wow.
So
Great. Well, here's to another 20. Are you up for another 20?
I'm up for, yeah, way more than that. Way
Excellent.
more than that.
Good deal. Well, thank you so much, Wade, for a glimpse into what's going on over there, and we'll be happy to continue to work together on things as we can. And again, I just want to say thank you for investing the time, and look forward to chatting again with you soon.
All right. Well, you're welcome, Dave. Thank you.
Take care.